The drama is a very honest and subtle psychological film that explores the difference between a real and an illusory personality of a person. It also addresses the painful topic of school shootings in the United States and touches on the problem of hypocrisy in people who often do not notice their own flaws but judge others much more harshly. This is a film that feels like several psychotherapy sessions, and if we simplify its emotional structure, we can say that the character played by Robert Pattinson goes through certain stages of a collapse in reality. The first reaction is complete emotional paralysis, the realization that you actually do not know the person you have spent years with. This is the moment when the familiar picture of the world literally breaks. Next, denial of the new reality is activated. The character tries to preserve the previous perception of the partner and return to the old feeling of safety. When denial stops working, irritation and inner protest appear. This is anger not only at the person but also at the situation itself, because now one has to accept a truth that is unpleasant and requires an emotional choice, either to accept it or to abandon the previous image of love. This is a key turning point. Love is often based not only on the real person, but also on their idealized version. And now this structure is destroyed. Feelings still remain, but perception has already changed. He still loves her, but can no longer see her the same way as before. After the destruction of the image, distance appears. The character stops fighting for the previous reality and goes into self-reflection, trying to find ways of emotional relief. For example, an attempt to avoid the truth and justify Emma's past through self-deception, or a physical intimacy with a colleague. This is a stage where the relationship still formally exists, but the emotional connection has already begun to fade. After a cumulative emotional explosion of truth, he finally lets go of the illusory reality, in order to painfully accept the current reality and endure the gap between the former and present life. The final stage is not about relief, but about resignation and acceptance. The character understands that returning to the previous perception is no longer possible. This is a painful realization of new truth about the person and about himself. This is a view of the problem from the perspective of Pattinson's character, and it's subjective, as is the view of every character. In the context of the situation and the degree of severity of each character's actions, there is no single correct side. But a central theme of the film is the truth that destroys the relationship between Charlie and Emma, and the question, how should they continue living? Should they work on each other's internal problems or abandon the attempt to build a shared future? Let us examine the film's problematic through the worldview of Emma's character, then through her friend Rachel, the more adequate character Mike, and finally through the overall meaning of the film. Emma is an example of a person with deep internal trauma that she tries to conceal by constructing an alternative version of herself in relationships. She does not so much lie as try to appear rather than be. This is a key problem for any person who is forced to play a social role in society. In Emma's case, this issue becomes more severe because Robert Pattinson's character effectively forms a distorted image of Emma in his perception, which he describes in his wedding speech. Here the film goes beyond childhood trauma, bullying, lack of attention. It moves into a broader social context. The film touches on the idea that in certain societies, for example, the United States, there is a cultural normalization of violence, including media attention around school shootings and widespread access to weapons. When combined with suppressed aggression, for example, due to bullying or social isolation, the psyche may become fixated on violent scenarios as a way of gaining control and protection. Emma's background also suggests an important context: lack of maternal emotional support, upbringing in a stricter, more structured environment, in her case, a police officer father. This may indicate a lack of emotional safety and secure attachment. Together, all of these forms internal instability that doesn't necessarily lead to crime, but may manifest in anxious and aggressive thoughts and psychological impulses. It's important to emphasize, Emma doesn't do anything truly horrific in reality. although her internal fantasies and anxious impulses create a sense of potential danger. The social circle she joined as a teenager gave her something she lacked: attention, emotional fulfillment, and a sense of belonging. This likely became a turning point that led to positive changes in her life. However, a later scene of emotional confrontation brings her back into a suppressed state she had been slowly recovering from, and the catalyst of the entire chain of events becomes Rachel. It's interesting that after Emma's secret is revealed, many characters change their attitude toward her, especially her close loved one. And here the film raises another theme: how quickly society shifts from acceptance to condemnation when faced with uncomfortable truth about a person. From this moment, let us move on to Rachel. Rachel is an ambiguous, contradictory character. She pretends to be a virtuous person who condemns immoral actions of others, while at the same time covering up her own sins. She is critical of others, but not self-critical. She doesn't know how to analyze other people's actions, while treating her own actions carelessly. She tries to present other people's actions in a negative light in order to assert herself in her own false righteousness. Rachel instills a feeling of guilt in Emma through another case involving a relative of Rachel who was affected by a shooting. The connection between these cases exists only in shootings, which Emma did not commit. At the same time, Rachel practically committed a crime, almost killing a person, and treated it normally, explaining this incident as a state of shock she was in at that moment, while ignoring the fact that she left the person in danger and forgot about him. In this case, Rachel had no right to blame Emma, having a bad past herself. On the other hand, it's not correct to consider her the most toxic character in the film, since at the end of the film there are brief scenes showing her standing up for the beaten Charlie, who was protecting Emma. She is an ordinary social person, and she has the qualities of a person with double standards, superficial empathy, and a social stereotype of dividing people into normal and abnormal. Despite all of these, real feelings emerge from her, hidden behind a social mask. This is another example of human duality: who a person is and who they try to appear to be in society. Compared to the other characters, Mike doesn't stand out much, because he is simple, without emotional extremes, and calmly weighs the situation, understanding all sides and not creating conflict. The point of any film is to create the dramaturgy of unusual, problematic personalities. Mike doesn't fit as a protagonist or as a character for emotional cinema, because he is mature and self-aware. The other characters are dramatic. They like to dwell on the problem and bring it to catharsis, while Mike always tries to smooth things over and avoid extreme consequences. That's why Mike is different from everyone. He's an adult, while the others are immature. Mike doesn't live an illusion, but is himself without pretending, which is why he integrates more easily into this real reality. Unlike Charlie and Emma, Mike doesn't try to control love, hide personality, or preserve an ideal image of relationships. The DJ girl is a mechanism through which the film shows the projection of the character's internal conflict onto an external object. The situation with the DJ is objectively not a catastrophe. Even if she used drugs, it does not directly destroy the wedding, it doesn't critically affect reality, and it doesn't require an emotional explosion, but the characters use her as a screen for their internal conflicts. Emma's behavior appears contradictory. First, she protects the DJ, justifies her, tries to show empathy, but this is not accidental. This is the moment when Emma unconsciously protects her own vulnerability, because the DJ is a reflection of her internal imperfection and hidden impulses. Then a sharp turning point occurs. She rejects the protection, emotionally cuts off contact, and fires her based on a moral label. This is a defensive reaction. It's easier to judge another person than to confront one's own internal conflict. Charlie reacts in the opposite way. First, he suspects, rationalizes the situation, leans toward firing her. Then, he starts to justify the DJ, softens the situation, tries to explain her behavior. And here appears the key moment. Charlie no longer looks down on the DJ. After his own moral mistake, his position as a judge breaks down, and he realizes that he himself is hiding uncomfortable truth. In this scene, the film unfolds a key idea. Almost every person in a relationship system hides something. Not because they are evil, but because they are vulnerable. And Charlie begins to realize this through his own experience. As a result, Charlie and Emma react differently to their own fears, guilt, and internal conflicts. The ending of the third act can be described through a very simple but painful formula: better a bitter truth than a sweet lie. Despite the scandal, exposure, and physical conflict, including Charlie being beaten, everything that happens in this act turns out not to be a catastrophe for the sake of catastrophe, but a necessary destruction of illusion, because the alternative would be continuing to live inside a distorted, comfortable, but false reality. Honesty in this film is not a moral slogan, and the film shows an important duality. Honesty with oneself and with others can destroy relationships, but it can also open the possibility for a more mature and conscious connection. Relationships live not in reality, but in the interpretation of reality. The characters in the drama do not simply learn facts about each other, they lose the images they loved. The film doesn't say that honesty is bad, it says something different. Absolute honesty without psychological readiness can destroy the emotional structure it's trying to maintain. And yet, ultimately, there remains an almost invisible hope that, having survived the crisis, people will be able to move forward, and if love and awareness are preserved, build more honest and harmonious relationships. A person almost always chooses between a comfortable illusion and a painful reality, and maturity begins at the moment when the illusion no longer works. If you like this analysis, support the video with a like and subscribe to the channel. Press the bell so you don't miss new reviews and psychological film analysis. Thank you for watching, see you in the next videos.